one of Sean Diddy Combs' many victims who worked at his infamous white parties, has filed a lawsuit against the rapper, revealing the horrors she witnessed while being forced into sex trafficking for 5 years. Adria English was forced to work as a sex worker at Diddy's white parties. At first, he told her she'd just be a dancer, but things quickly changed when Diddy put a price on her body and started offering to his guests, forcing her to wear specific colors as a dress code to signal that she was available for intimate favors. In her lawsuit, Adria named several people involved in the trafficking network, including celebrities and popular magazines, where victims were openly showcased as if they were part of a catalog of perversions. Initially, Adria thought Diddy would be her savior as she had just arrived in New York with no money and nowhere to stay, and he offered her a chance to work at his parties. The job opportunity came through her boyfriend, rising model Anthony Gallo, who met Diddy during an audition for a Sean John campaign. Diddy told him that if he performed fellatio, he'd not only get the job but also help jumpstart his career. Anthony refused, but later Diddy told him he'd still help him if he convinced his girlfriend to work as an exotic dancer at his parties, which seemed like a legitimate job opportunity.
Anthony Gallo goes in the room and he comes out yelling, fuck that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He was like, I'll talk to you in the elevator. And we get to the elevator, he's like, nigga tried to ask me to suck his dick. I said, who asked you to suck his dick? He said, Diddy. I said, fuck that. But then after that, he booked him anyway, because I agreed to dance at the white parties.
Adria recalls that during the first 2 white parties, uncomfortable things happened, yet she felt desperate for money. She explains that they first provided her with a uniform, and Diddy pressured her to perform lap dances and flirt sexually with the guests he indicated. She also claimed that all the female and male staff were required to drink alcohol from bottles exclusive to them. Adria later found out it was because they were laced with ecstasy to make them more obedient and compliant. Despite everything, Adria continued attending the parties and was even praised by Diddy. However, at the next event, things took a much darker turn when she was given a black dress, which Adria believes served to denote her capacity there as an employee, but more sinisterly, as a sex-trafficked sex worker. One of the individuals she was forced to engage with was the famous jewelry and watch designer Jacob Arabo. This was a photo taken of her with her attacker after the assault.
One individual who was 22 years at the time she was assaulted said that the typical MO at one of these parties that have been widely discussed in the press was that when you were handed a drink, and now we know that the drink is laced with something, if you refused to drink it, you were kicked out of the party.
Adria wasn't Diddy's only victim. There were both men and women around her who were exploited for the same purpose in his sex trafficking operation. But the most disturbing part was that they were advertised like merchandise in Vibe magazine. According to the lawsuit, a photo was taken of Adria while she was working at the parties, which later appeared in the November 2006 issue of the magazine as part of an 18-page spread promoting Diddy's parties. Of course, her name wasn't mentioned. She was intentionally mislabeled as a guest to further conceal the true intentions of the event and plaintiff's employment role at the event. Additionally, the magazine featured several ads for Diddy's products, most notably his cologne, Unforgivable. The 2-page ad, with the tagline, "Life without passion is unforgivable," didn't stand out 20 years ago. However, today, Adria and her lawyers believe that Diddy used these ads to send coded messages to the guests at his parties. As the leader of a sex trafficking operation, he needed a way to communicate certain messages that his accomplices could understand. Adria endured years of abuse not only because Diddy threatened to ruin her boyfriend Anthony Gallo's career, but also because he promised to launch her music career. He made her part of a girl group, but the truth was that her role at the parties was always more important to Diddy than keeping that promise. Adria eventually realized that he would never see her as anything more than a pawn in his exploitation scheme, so she returned to California as quickly as possible. But the consequences came quickly, starting with Anthony, who was blacklisted from the modeling industry, and any trace of him in Sean John campaigns was erased. Right after, Diddy made sure she was unwelcome in any part of the industry, putting an end to her career before it even began. Something similar happened to Rodney Jones, also known as Lil Rod, who accused Diddy of grooming and pressuring him into gay sex. During the year they worked together, Sean Combs did everything he could to persuade Jones to accept his advances. He even confessed to having been with several rappers in the industry to build trust, saying, "This is a normal practice in the music industry." While the lawsuit doesn't name the rappers he allegedly slept with, the footnotes describe the first as a Philadelphia rapper who dated Nicki Minaj, and the second as someone who performed at the Super Bowl and had a successful Vegas residency. The first one is clearly Meek Mill, and the second fits the profile of Usher, who headlined the Super Bowl show in 2024 and began his Vegas residency in 2021. When Diddy's attempt to normalize sleeping with men in the industry didn't convince Jones, he intensified his approach. He shared a video of music producer Stevie J in a sexual encounter with another man, hoping this would change Jones's perspective. These are some screenshots from the video that are included in the lawsuit. Diddy was aware that Jones greatly admired Stevie J, so he thought this tactic would influence his perception and make him want to imitate someone he considered a role model. Again, his control strategy failed, but Diddy wouldn't take no for an answer, so he stopped asking and started forcing the issue. In the lawsuit, Jones recounts feeling that Diddy was grooming him to pass him along to his friends like he was a piece of meat, and this became reality when he introduced him to the actor accused of S.A. Cuba Gooding Jr. During the introduction, Mr. Combs suggested that Cuba get to know Mr. Jones better. Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's legs, his upper inner thighs near his groin, the small of his back, near his buttocks, and his shoulders. Jones repeatedly rejected Cuba's advances and tried to keep his composure, but it became so unbearable that he had to push him away to prevent things from going any further. This is a screenshot from the video that Jones's lawyers submitted to the court, where Cuba's unusual approach is clearly visible. His entire body seems to be seeking contact with Jones, and he appears to be looking at his lips or his body.
Cuban Gooding Jr. was so close to that man. I would thought that was his lady. That's how close he was to him. And then his hands all on his leg and everything. It was crazy, bro.
Despite all of Jones's efforts to prevent these encounters, his nightmare became a reality when Diddy drugged him. The next day, Jones woke up naked and dizzy next to him and two prostitutes with no memory of what had happened.
Doing this situation is not easy. Taking Puff to court, suing him is not easy. I won't be that guy 20, 30 years from now looking back saying, I wish I'd done this. I'm going to do this now.
Some criticized Jones's choice to stay with Diddy for so long, but as you can see, the control and power he exerted over him were chilling, making him feel like he belonged to him, both body and mind. Just listen to what happened at the beginning of their working relationship and imagine the impact this could have on a person. Lil Rod was in a recording studio with Diddy, his son Justin Combs, and other musicians when a heated argument erupted between Diddy, his son, and a man named G. This confrontation escalated, leading them to take G into a bathroom where he was shot multiple times. Lil Rod saw Diddy and his son coming out of the bathroom, leaving the injured man behind. Noticing that no one was helping, he got up to offer assistance and told the others to call an ambulance. But before that, Diddy forced everyone to tell the police that G had been injured by a drive-by assailant outside the studio. Little did he know that Lil Rod took photos of the bathroom after the shooting and kept the clothes he wore that day, which may still contain G's DNA. But trust me, what you've heard so far isn't even the worst of it. Things take an even darker turn from here. On July 2nd, 2023, Diddy hosted a party at his home with a rapper whose name is not mentioned, but is described in the footnotes as, he is a Grammy award-winning R&B singer who had trouble with law enforcement after assaulting a Bajan billionaire. This description perfectly fits the profile of Chris Brown, who won a Grammy in 2012 for Best R&B Album for Fame, and is widely known for physically assaulting Rihanna, who is originally from Barbados. Jones claims that Diddy, as usual, asked him to hire sex workers. An hour later, several women showed up, but this time something was different. 5 girls under the age of 16 also arrived at the party. Almost immediately, Diddy forced them to drink DeLeon liquor laced with ecstasy, and even though Jones expressed his discomfort and tried to leave, Diddy forced him to stay, going so far as to take his car keys to prevent him from leaving. Later, he forced Jones to take shots of the laced liquor, and soon after he began to feel dizzy and quickly passed out. He remembers waking up at 4 a.m. naked and next to a sax worker. These are the screenshots from the video that Jones recorded that night. As the investigation against Diddy unfolds, it has come to light that a significant percentage of underage boys and girls have suffered abuse at his expense.
When we talk about the ages of the victims when the conduct occurred, it's shocking. Our youngest victim at the time of the occurrence was 9 years old. We have an individual who was 14 years old. We have one who was 15. 25 of the 120 individuals who are plaintiffs in these cases were minors at the time of the acts complained of.
In order for these terrible acts to take place, Diddy had an entire support network, starting with Christina Coram, who has been described as the Ghislaine Maxwell, to Sean Combs' Jeffrey Epstein. This support was evident when Jones saw Christina in action because he often told her about feeling uncomfortable with Diddy's constant advances. In response, she would say, and I quote, "You know, Sean will be Sean." KK also attempted to downplay Mr. Combs' groping of Mr. Jones' anus and genitals as friendly horseplay, stating that those acts were Mr. Combs' way of showing that he likes you. Additionally, Christina forced him and many others, from the butler to the chefs, to carry a fanny pack filled with various types of narcotics. She was known to order her assistants to keep Mr. Combs high on gummies and pills. Brendan Paul served as the mule, responsible for acquiring and distributing Diddy's drugs and weapons, while Justin Combs, yes, Diddy's son, was in charge of sourcing sex workers for the freak-offs. This group of criminals liked to brag to Jones about all the illegal acts they'd committed. They especially took pride in recounting how they framed Shine for the crime Diddy committed during the 1999 NYC nightclub shooting, making it clear that he couldn't do anything against them because they had the jurors on their side. This method of using control through fear and violence was Diddy's main tactic against his victims since the start of his criminal career. For example, in 1990, he persuaded Liza Gardner and her friend to go out for drinks with him and Aaron Hall. By the end of the night, they were invited to his apartment, claiming it was for an after-party. But when they arrived, Diddy coerced Liza into having sex, while Aaron did the same with her friend. Afterward, they switched rooms and repeated the horrific act. Both friends ran away from the place, but a few days later, Diddy showed up at Liza's house in a rage and started choking her until she lost consciousness. According to the lawsuit, Combs was searching for Liza Gardner's friend because he was worried that she would tell the girl he was with at the time what he and Hall had done to them. Since it was 1990, the woman mentioned might be Misa Hilton, the mother of his first son, Justin Combs. The most shocking part of this case is that Liza and her friend were both underage, just like Diddy's next victim. Jane Doe was still in high school when she met Combs at a lounge in Michigan. He and two other guys convinced her to take a private jet to his studio in New York, where they gave her drugs and alcohol. As the night went on, Jane became more intoxicated to the point where she couldn't give consent, especially not to someone twice her age. Despite her condition, the three men gang-raped her, starting with Diddy, who said, quote, that he could not get off unless she pinched his nipples as hard as she could. Afterwards, Jane was left curled up on the floor, in pain and unable to get up. The men had to help her out of the building and to the airport for her flight back to Michigan. Unlike other victims, Jane has photographic evidence of being with Diddy in his New York studio. Remember, when viewing these, Ms. Doe was 17 years old. She found the courage to speak out against Diddy, inspired and empowered by the brave women who came forward before her, like Joy Dickerson. Joy had many mutual friends with Diddy and had even appeared in some of his music videos. Because of this closeness, he insisted on having dinner together, and she reluctantly agreed, sensing he wouldn't accept a no for an answer. At some point during the night, Joy went to the bathroom, leaving her drink unattended, during which she believes Diddy slipped something in it. When they finished dinner, he pressured her to accompany him to take care of some pending matters, and she agreed due to his insistence. However, it was later noted in the legal documents that getting into Combs' car that day was something Ms. Dickerson would come to regret forever. Whatever Diddy put in her drink left her in a physical state where she could not stand or walk independently. Taking advantage of this, Diddy SA'd her and then did something he would repeatedly do throughout his criminal life. He recorded the assault without Joy even realizing it. After the traumatic event, Joy felt devastated, embarrassed, and even guilty, so she decided not to go to the hospital or report the incident to the police. She simply sought refuge in her apartment. The next day, things got worse when a friend told her that he had seen the tape and that, in fact, everyone at school had seen it. Joey felt as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over her. She couldn't look anyone in the eye because in their gaze, she saw the reflection of that day replaying almost like a mockery. Ms. Dickerson's life went into a tailspin. She returned to college, but soon had to be admitted into the hospital for severe depression and suicide ideation. Despite her desperate attempts to carry on with her life, Joy began to experience post-traumatic stress disorder, extreme sleeplessness for days on end, social withdrawal, and would recoil at even the most basic physical touch. She ultimately had to leave school when her classmates labeled her as crazy after learning about her admission to a psychiatric unit. But her story doesn't end here. Diddy re-entered her life and did something that completely ruined it. Despite her emotional pain, Joey continued working in the music industry, helping to plan parties attended by rappers and DJs. One night, she unfortunately ran into Diddy, and despite her efforts to avoid him, he backed her into a corner and confronted her in front of a crowd. He insisted on his knees that he hadn't done any of the things she was accusing him of, pleading with her to believe him because things hadn't happened the way she remembered. After that encounter, many people asked Joy what was going on with Diddy, but she decided not to share, knowing they were all people who regularly worked with him. Following the incident, Joy realized she couldn't keep working in the music industry. With Diddy's career taking off, she would inevitably keep running into him. As time went on, Diddy's disturbing practice of recording his victims escalated to grotesque levels. According to Cassie Ventura's lawsuit, she revealed that the rapper gave her specific instructions on what to do when she was forced to engage with a sax worker. Mr. Combs would say things like, "Grab that big black and ask her, how does it feel?" as he directed her to perform for him. He even forced her to wear specific clothing and follow other details, as if he were directing a music video. Ms. Ventura was required to dress up in lingerie for an FO, and Mr. Combs insisted she wear white nail polish to contrast her nails with the skin of the black men he hired to have sex with her. But to reach this level of control, Diddy started by being the most charming man in the world, all while promising Cassie a successful career. In 2006, she signed a 10-album deal with Diddy's record label when she was 19 and he was 37, nearly 2 decades apart in age. From the very beginning of their working relationship, he started acting like a father figure to her. For instance, on one occasion when Cassie decided to go out to a club with her friends, Diddy reprimanded her, telling her to go home and take care of herself, which made her think he had her best interests in mind. Little by little, Diddy inserted himself into every aspect of Cassie's life. Just before her 21st birthday, he forcibly kissed her. She pushed him away and ran, but after that incident, the rapper began drugging her to make her more submissive. On one of those nights when he forced her to take drugs, Diddy pressured her into sleeping with him. Just 2 years after their first meeting, Cassie found herself trapped in an abusive relationship with her boss, the owner of her record label and one of the most powerful men in the industry.
I can imagine what that little girl went through. I've been next to people who are top in the game, in the music business. And they had said to me, yo, I had to suck a lot of to get to this position.
From the start, Diddy used one of the most common tactics among abusers and emotional predators, financial control. By paying for her house, car, vacations, and even the clothes she wore, he stripped away her independence, making her feel trapped and unable to stand on her own. Beyond financial control, Diddy also manipulated Cassie emotionally. One clear example of this was when he asked her how she affectionately referred to her grandfather. When Mr. Ventura said that she referred to her grandfather as Pop Pop, Mr. Combs perversely insisted that Ms. Ventura refer to him with that nickname. This seemingly harmless gesture was actually a form of manipulation. By taking over a term of family affection, Diddy was asserting control, making it seem like he should have the same, or even more, emotional importance in Cassie's life. Things soon escalated to the next level of violence, physical abuse. According to the lawsuit, over the following decade, Cassie became a victim of Diddy's uncontrollable outbursts, which left her in such terrible condition that he had to use his money and power to orchestrate extensive efforts to hide the evidence of his abuse, including by hiding Ms. Ventura in hotels for days at a time to let her bruises heal. On one occasion, after a party with JayZ, Mr. Combs beat Ms. Ventura repeatedly in an Escalade, including by kicking and hitting her. According to Cassie, this happened for no apparent reason, as she had begun to understand what triggered Diddy's violent outbursts. And this time, she hadn't done anything to upset him. For example, in another instance, he saw her talking to another music manager at a party, which led to one of the worst beatings she remembers. Mr. Combs beat Ms. Ventura, pushing her into a corner of the vehicle and stomping on her face. Ms. Ventura was bleeding profusely and was ushered into Mr. Combs's home, where she began to throw up from the violent assault. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, Diddy forced her into sex trafficking, telling her that one of his fantasies was watching her with other men. The first time it happened, Diddy brought a man to his house. The three of them put on masks and took drugs. After that, he directed Cassie and the other man to perform the act exactly how he wanted, while he watched and masturbated. The entire encounter lasted multiple days. Diddy started calling these encounters freak-offs and began requesting them on a weekly basis, telling Cassie that it was our thing and our secret. Soon, he forced her to organize the locations and even select the male sex workers, with the only request being to search for large black penises on the website. His assistants would help her set up the rooms where the FOs took place, including filling the suites with baby oil and lubricants. This explains why there were reportedly over 1,000 bottles in his mansion, as he instructed Cassie to pour excessive amounts of oil over herself. It was also the job of his assistants to prepare intravenous fluids after a FO, as the participants desperately needed to recover from the large amounts of drugs Diddy gave them. And as usual, Diddy recorded all of their encounters, either with his phone or Cassie's, and she would try to delete everything she found on hers. But even when she deleted the videos, Mr. Combs would tell Ms. Ventura that he was able to recover deleted videos from her devices. On one occasion, he sat next to her on a flight and made her watch a video she thought she had deleted, reinforcing her inability to escape and the immense power he held over her. Over time, the FOs became a job for her, as Diddy would give her expensive gifts as payment afterward. Whenever she tried to distance herself from him, Diddy would become extremely violent. For example, during a rough patch in their relationship, Cassie had a brief affair with musician Kid Cudi. When Diddy found out, he threatened her with a manual corkscrew, pressing it against her throat, and told her he would blow up Cudi's car. A few weeks after the threat, Cudi's car actually exploded while parked in his driveway. Witnesses confirmed it was set on fire intentionally with a Molotov cocktail. After 10 years of abuse, the incident at the Intercontinental Hotel in March 2016 finally put Diddy in the public eye and served as undeniable evidence of Cassie's claims and encouraging other victims to come forward. On that day, during a freak-off, Diddy became heavily intoxicated and hit Cassie in the face. After he passed out, Cassie tried to flee the room, but seconds later, he woke up and chased after her. To stop her, he took glass vases in the hallway and threw them at her, causing glass to crash around them as she ran to the elevator to escape. When he finally caught up to her, he brutally beat her and dragged her back to the room. It was later revealed that Diddy paid $50,000 to the hotel for the security footage from the hallway that night. After this incident, Cassie did everything she could to end the relationship, but it wasn't until 2019 that she was finally able to fully separate from her abuser, which included signing contracts to terminate her deal with his record label. But one of the most sinister aspects of the Sean Diddy Combs case is the legacy he was leaving behind for his children. And we don't have to speculate because there's an actual lawsuit against Christian Combs for abuse. The most chilling part is that it details how his father orchestrated everything to ensure he got away with it. In December 2022, Diddy rented a yacht to spend the holidays with his family, and the charter service provided several staff members to attend to them during their stay. Among them was Grace O'Marquet, who was forced by Christian Combs to drink spiked liquor before he sexually assaulted her. A disturbingly familiar pattern, if you ask me. What Christian didn't know was that Grace managed to record audio of the attack and use it in her lawsuit. Grace was assigned the night shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., along with one other team member. There were only two of them because they were meant to serve just Diddy's family. However, as usual, the so-called family vacation quickly turned into a hedonistic environment, with a rotating cast of sax workers and celebrities like French Montana, Cuba Gooding Jr., Young Miami, and even Lil Rod, the other plaintiff we already discussed in the video. This led to an unexpected increase in workload and created a highly dangerous environment. The staff was disrespected, sax workers were passed out all over the yacht, and it became nearly impossible to tell which bottles of alcohol were spiked. In the early hours of December 28th, Grace received a message from Christian, who wanted to come to the yacht to record in the studio. He usually stayed in a nearby luxury villa, but that night he seemed out of control, clearly intoxicated and full of excessive energy. Once in the studio, Christian asked Grace to bring shots, but handed her the bottle to use, leading her to assume it was spiked. Right away, she noticed how he was being overly flirty and inappropriate, and she started feeling uncomfortable about being the only woman on duty at that hour. Her anxiety increased when he insisted she drink with him, but fearing consequences, she reluctantly accepted a shot. She felt somewhat relieved when Lil Rod eventually joined them in the studio. The atmosphere quickly shifted when Christian forced her to sit next to him. Grace tried to politely step away, but he grabbed her arm violently, refusing to let her leave. At that point, the situation escalated and Christian began physically assaulting her. According to the lawsuit, he touched plaintiff's legs, breasts, anus, and vagina. He also tried to kiss her and proceeded to kiss her neck, face, and hands. This is the transcript of the audio Grace submitted in her lawsuit. Yo, it's shot o'clock. No, I'm not doing shots. I'll just put the ledge. No, take the whole thing. I'm only doing it as long as you take it as well. I ain't going to lie. I'm not taking nothing. Please, take the shot. You are drugging me? I'm going to stop. I have to go. Honestly, I'm like already losing sleep. I have to go now. You're the best one on this ship though. Excuse me. You don't touch my legs like that. I can't. I promise you. I wish I could, but I can't. Unless I say that you guys requested me. Yes, who can I talk to right now? Who can I talk to? I'm going to say I requested you right now. Well, you can take your hand off my ass for the first thing. Grace fled the studio, but Christian chased after her, demanding that she find him a place to sleep. Since all the cabins were taken, she led him to the theater room, which served as an additional resting area. However, he took advantage of the situation, blocking her exit and trapping her in the corner. Defendant C. Combs then took off all of his clothes. His penis was erect, and he grabbed her arms and was trying to force plaintiff to perform oral copulation on him. During the struggle, Grace's co-worker came across the theater room, giving her a chance to escape. The next morning, she reported the incident to the captain, but instead of showing concern, he accused her of partying on the job. As punishment, he personally assigned her to Christian for the rest of the trip. Both Diddy and Christina Coram, along with other assistants, learned about what had happened. To prevent any action against his son or himself, Diddy gave the yacht captain a generous tip to keep him quiet. This isolation and retaliation finally resulted in plaintiff's termination by Captain Peter Milkoff on or around May 10, 2023. These are some of the photos showing the bruises Grace got during the struggle that night. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the shocking allegations surrounding Sean Diddy Combs, it's clear that this case is far from over. In just the last few weeks, over 12,000 calls have flooded into a reporting hotline specifically set up for victims of Diddy's alleged crimes. The scale of this is unprecedented, as more than 120 accusers have come forward, including 25 minors who claim they were abused during what were supposed to be auditions for Bad Boy Records. The allegations against Diddy span over 25 years, and the sheer number of victims reveals just how wide this network of abuse could be.
Another instance, this individual, who was 9 years old at the time, was taken to an audition in New York City with Bad Boy Records. Other boys were there to audition as well. All of them were trying to land a record deal. All of them were minors. This individual was sexually abused, allegedly by Sean Combs and several other people at the studio, in the promise to both his parents and to him himself of getting a record deal. Another minor told, allegedly by Sean Combs, that he would make him a star, but he needed to visit with him in private about it, away from his parents. Once they were in a private area, allegedly Mr. Combs made the victim perform oral sex upon him.
In the midst of all this, Diddy's mother, Janice Smalls, has publicly defended her son. While she acknowledges that Diddy hasn't always been perfect, she firmly stands by his innocence, calling these accusations lies and the product of individuals looking to profit from her son's downfall. It is heartbreaking to see my son judged not for the truth, but for a narrative created out of lies. My son may not have been entirely truthful about certain things, such as denying he has ever gotten violent with an ex-girlfriend when the hotel's surveillance showed otherwise. I am not here to portray my son as perfect, because he is not. He has made mistakes in his past, as we all have. Meanwhile, the Shakur family has hired a high-profile lawyer to investigate Diddy's potential involvement in the murder of Tupac. This connection has long been whispered about in the hip-hop community, and now the Shakur family is actively seeking justice, looking for any possible ties between Diddy and the tragic killing in 1996. At the same time, another unsettling development has come to light. It's not just Diddy facing pressure, but also several high-profile celebrities who are scrambling to pay off victims to keep their names out of the scandal. According to Tony Busby, the lawyer representing many of Diddy's alleged victims, stars like JayZ, Beyonce, and Kim Kardashian have been involved in monetary settlements to avoid public exposure in the ongoing trials.